Hey, thanks for joining me. We are back to our series of doing deeper dives into some of our bigger markets. And today, Dan Lowe from our Indiana office is joining me, and we are going to do a deeper dive into the healthcare world. Dan, we have seen a significant increase in both the number and size of healthcare projects. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the reasons driving that?
I think everybody was focused on COVID, and there was really some pent up demand for getting back to normal day-to-day construction. Every major market either has a large project going on, a large project that's coming up, or there's one in the next 12 to 13 months. And we really think it's demand for the quality and the experience for the patient.
So, how much of that do you think is also based on competition between hospitals and healthcare systems in their push for not just patients, but staff and physicians and everything else that goes with a hospital?
You hear it in the news all the time. Beforehand, it was, hey, we want to attract these doctors. We want doctors to come work for us. We want to get the experts. And now it's the nurses. There's a shortage of nurses throughout the United States. And a traveling nurse is now a new business. I would say they represent a quarter of the nurses at a hospital, and they're signing on 13 to 16 weeks. They've had to work so hard for what this pandemic's caused. You have to feel for those nurses, and we really have to make their lives better because they are working so hard, and it is such just a stressful job. It's just night and day different compared to what I thought it would be, even 3 years ago.
Yeah. Are you seeing things in some of the design of these new projects that are there specifically for nurses?
Yeah. In one particular in southern Indiana, we're seeing an LDR floor get remodeled to actually have more nurse stations, be closer to the patient so that you're not in the center. So we're seeing a lot of satellite nurse stations for them to touch down on and really be closer to the patient.
There was a drawing I was looking at for a project here just the other day, and on a floor that there would typically, you would think, be 2 nurses stations, there were as many as 6.
Yeah, yeah. And we're adding more touchdown areas for them to come right outside and work right there outside the patient. All we can do is try to make their lives better and try to help them out during the day and make their job easier.
Are there other examples that you've seen where either different departments or functions within a hospital are changing or moving to improve or enhance the logistics or service that the physicians and staff give to patients?
So we've just were rewarded a large project in Indianapolis that's bringing the NICUs and the LDRs under one roof. Today, they're in 2 different buildings, and it's a new 8-story tower. And it's putting the LDRs, the high-risk LDRs, and the NICUs and PICUs all into the same building. That way, if a mother wants to go down and see their baby, all they're really doing is travel in an elevator instead of have to get up and go across campus to go see the NICUs. So we're seeing a little bit of that, kind of a more consolidation to make it better for the patient. We're also seeing an upgrade to make it nice, to upgrade the finishes and to make the overall finishes nicer.
I know something that we are seeing in Illinois is a further consolidation of healthcare systems where there are becoming fewer and fewer owners who own more and more hospitals. And I know there are projects that we have seen that bring 2 systems together to make them function more similarly.
We haven't seen much of that, but what we've seen is the bigger healthcare networks expanding into new areas. IU Health's the largest healthcare network in Indiana, and now they're moving up to Fort Wayne where they've never had a presence. And now they're building a brand new hospital in Fort Wayne.
So changing gears, Dan, I know virtually on every project we see, there's a question about inflation and escalation and where that's going. We've seen somewhere between 10 and 15% across the board increases. Are you seeing those same kind of increases in Indiana, and anything in particular that's either more or less than that?
Yeah, we are seeing those increases in Indiana. Really, we're trying to get out in front of anything that we know of. We know that roofing is a major factor right now. Who would have thought that you need to buy roofing a year beforehand? And that's an early procurement now, just as much as MEP and steel is roofing. The other thing that we're running into lately is concrete. They couldn't get the material to the job site. Probably 30 or 40% of a major concrete supplier had trucks just sitting because they couldn't hire the drivers to get them there. And that became an issue. And now it has become a material issue. And so they're starting to really downsize no pours on Saturdays. You really need to call a couple weeks ahead to make sure your pour dates happen. And we're paying upwards to $140 to $150 a yard for concrete, which is extremely high for us.
Yeah, and those are the same kind of prices that we're seeing here in, the metropolitan Chicago area. Is part of that related to the cost of fuel and the ready mix suppliers looking for a fuel surcharge on top of the ready mix charge as well?
Yeah, fuel is a problem, but it's also demand. There's a lot of construction going on in Indianapolis area right now. Between warehouses, healthcare, there's a ton of construction, and a lot of these structures are concrete structures.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just driving up the price because of the demand. And we're putting down millions and millions of square feet of warehouses every year for the last few years, and they just can't get the material to the job site. So we're paying a premium for it.
Yeah. And I read something just the other day that talked about some of those markets being some of the strongest markets out there in the construction industry, the warehousing and industrial world. But healthcare was right up there in the top 3 or 4 as being one of those markets that has shown growth and resurgence and expected continued growth. Are you seeing things out there in the longer term as well?
Yeah, we're seeing large projects in the Indianapolis area outside of what we've interviewed so far, which has probably been 5 or 6 $100+ million projects. We still see 4 or 5 more in the next year to 2 years. We see healthcare just rising, and we're happy about it, of course, because we're a big player in Indianapolis that does a lot of the healthcare, but we also would like to see it level out a little.
So when you get the question of future inflation and escalation from owners on those projects that are further out, what kind of things are you telling them that we can do, to mitigate some of those risks for them?
So we had a recent project that was awarded to us that we got awarded third quarter of last year, that Pepper went out and bought the generator, bought the air handling units. We worked with the engineer to be able to buy this, knowing that we're not going to start the project until January. So we ended up purchasing almost $7 million out of $28 million of equipment before we even put a shovel in the ground to even start, just because the lead time. Generators are a year out, switch gears a year out, switch boards is a year out. What our staff is doing really good is they're going directly to the suppliers and asking the question. They're not calling up to the sub and saying, hey, when's it coming? They're actually going to the point to where they're at. Okay, where's it at in fabrication? When do you think it's going to come out? And we're really hearing it from the horse's mouth on when our project is going to be delivered.
I just actually heard yesterday on a project of how important that is to go to the source. We'd heard from a curtain wall, window wall supplier or subcontractor that the material was going to be later than we expected. And the team actually took a trip to Atlanta to the fabrication plant. And it wasn't the glass, it wasn't the aluminum. It turned out to be the resin used in the paint to paint the aluminum that they couldn't get. So it just seems every day there is something new that we haven't heard of before. And I think the process you talked about of our teams being involved earlier only enhances our ability to mitigate that risk.
Correct. Yeah. And we're seeing buy-in from the owners too, because I think they understand it, that, hey, right now the market is just crazy. And we really need to get people on board so that we can go procure this. Even though your construction is out a ways, we have to buy it now or we're not going to get it.
You talked about the growth in Indiana. Are there issues or worries about labor shortages in the future?
Yes, we're seeing it now. We're seeing labor shortages now. Really, the masons, we're struggling trying to get enough masons to do the current work we have, let alone what's going on in the future. But we're also looking at electricians. We're also looking at pipe fitters. Those seem to be settled right now and people are on the board. But currently, Pepper, our drywall division, is probably short, 15 guys because they're just not there. And so we're looking at different ways to either start the project and do a pull plan to where, hey, I only can get this many people on the job site, so it's going to take this long. even though we still have to hit that milestone date, we work with our trade partners to try to balance it, knowing that we can't get the manpower. And if something falls off the critical path, we work with them to extend their durations to allow them to do it with half the staff they need because they're just not there. And with the uptick on work that's going on in the next 3 years, it's going to be worse in Indianapolis. So we just have to work with them early on and understand where we're at, and everybody wants it sooner and faster. We just have to look at different ways and collaborate with our trade partners early on to be able to get those schedules really dialed in. Because once you get people on the site, you want to keep that flow to allow them to stay on the site, because if they leave the site, it's a lot harder to get them back.
So it really sounds like just an enhanced level of planning and coordination and scheduling, the things that we've always done, except we've had to take them to a new level to ensure the completion dates based on, the labor that's available.
Correct. And it's just early collaboration, and we're bringing people on earlier, as early as possible, to understand. And we're trying to entice the workers. This job we're getting ready to start at St. Vincent Ascension, we're trying to get Peyton Manning out there. They're associated with Peyton Manning Hospital. We're trying to give them a safety parking spot so that they don't have to walk 4.5 blocks to get to the job site. We're trying to do little things that really bring it down to the tradesmen to want them to come to this job site. And really make it a fun atmosphere.
So what kinds of things are you doing with your owners that allows you to bring on those contractors earlier than maybe we would typically?
Actually, market driven. We're trying to bring our roofers on early. We're doing more of a design assist for curtain wall and exterior glazing, trying to get them on early because the material lead times are so long. And what we've done it in the past with an NDI 10-story hospital is we brought the curtain wall contractor on board and really helped the architect finish his drawings. We were able to say, hey, you know what, we're going to go with Conair, or we're going to go with this type of system. And they were able to bring in their shop drawings and help the architect kind of finalize his drawings and work through that and really get the best price and the best system for the project.
So then I'm assuming that you're coming up with some method to still competitively have those contractors compete for that work and then finalize or enhance the numbers as the design gets more and more complete.
Correct. We'd go after it in a competitive market. We were able to set up a bid package early by collaborating with the architects and engineers. And really, it's a decision by all of us, not just Pepper, on who we're bringing on board to see, hey, this team fits well, because the initial price may be low, but the overall price, we try to really get that budget within line to let them know that this is their GMP that they need to stick to and work with us to stay in line with that number throughout the finish of the design, or the completion of the design.
So it seems to me, regardless of what market or type of building that we are talking about in these times, so many of the activities that our staff has to do as part of their day-to-day job is really being pushed forward and compressed in order to provide the time and the flexibility to the extent possible to get things on site at the right time or meet the schedule on site at the right time.
That's correct. There is a lot of pressure on our staff to be able to get the materials on board. With this volatile market, they have to stay on top of their game. These late purchases, you have to buy early, because if you're a late purchase, you could run into an epoxy paint problem. You could run into just little things that you wouldn't think about it 5 years ago, but nowadays stuff's just being pushed out or stuff's being delayed. I don't know how many different times I heard of a fire in Texas shut down a warehouse and I can't get it. Is that true? Maybe, but it's just an issue, and they got to stay on top of their game and follow up.
One more question I've got, Dan. We've always prided ourselves on the high quality work that we do. Do the things that we've talked about today make any difference or enhance our need to focus on quality more or differently than in the past as well?
The one thing we have to really focus that up front is make sure we don't make a bad choice. Yeah, this might be cheaper, This might be somewhat the same, but ultimately, is it best for the hospital? And we got to just understand that if we're submitting, I'm saying Pepper or our trade partners are submitting an alternate, we really need to vet that alternate to understand, is it really the best for the hospital? So we need to do that up front. And then when we get that resolved, it really is concentrating on the superintendent, concentrating on the first install, because everybody's under the gun, just got here. We got to hurry up and get it in. But we really got to take the time to make sure we're doing it right.
And earlier you had talked about things like pull planning in the scheduling process, or with a reduced number of workers, having multiple trades being more overlapped and more on top of one another. I imagine then that watchful eye for the quality of the installation is just as important too.
Correct. That's right.
I really want to say thanks again, Dan, for taking time out of your day. And this remote format has been a little different, but fun to do. And it's always great to see you and learn more about what you and your team are up to in Indiana.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.